Paradox Pokemon are the massive reward that we gain from Scarlet and Violet. They are so unique, so interesting, so special, but there's been some uncertainty around these Pokemon, how they came to exist, and frankly, if they even exist. Now, if this sounds crazy, don't worry, we have all the evidence to back this up, as now new speculation is arising that Paradox Pokemon aren't what you think. And so today we'll be explaining the truth about the lore surrounding Paradox Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet. And I think it goes without saying, there will be some spoilers here. So if you are sensitive to the story endings and the nuances of Professor Sada, Professor Turo, the Paradox Pokemon, and the Paldea region, you have been warned. But this is fascinating developments and takes Pokemon to a place that, goodness gracious, this DLC is going to be explosive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think now that everybody who doesn't want to be spoiled is gone, I think everyone could agree that that ending has probably left everyone a little shook as to what Pokemon is even doing now. It was such a heavy ending that I think now that we're starting to see these ideas come to fruition, it's not so out of the realm. So let me kind of explain what Zach and I are talking about. So as you guys know, Paradox Pokemon are introduced in this game as Pokemon from the future, Pokemon from the past. Depending on which version you get, you're able to indulge yourself with these cool new designs with names that are, leave little to the imagination, but cool Pokemon nonetheless. While I was scrolling through Twitter, I happened to run across a thread that was just kind of comparing Paradox Pokemon designs, and it was a fun little conversation that certainly didn't turn into fights about the game at all. But someone pointed out that
No, hold on. I just want to say, yeah, Pokemon fans would never argue with one another. I don't know, guys. Joseph's new to the channel. You gotta forgive him.
Yeah, please, guys. I'm sorry. I'm still learning this Pokemon stuff too. But one of the comments really struck me because it pointed out something I never quite noticed, and something that was really in front of us from essentially the start of the game, even before when we got the trailer for this, and that is the sketches of the Paradox versions of Donphan. So as you guys know, we have Iron Treads and Great Tusks, who are the brand new versions of Donphan, who's like a fan favorite, very old Pokemon. Now, we were shown little teasers in a trailer beforehand, and also in-game, we were able to see depictions of these Pokemon way before we run into them. What's really interesting, and that some people noted and some people certainly didn't, like myself, is that those sketches happen to be a little off from what the Pokemon actually are. Now, this wouldn't be a concerning issue if it was for the fact that these are in the game. These are actually, it's not concept art. This isn't a scrapped version. This isn't them getting to that design. These are in the game, and there is actually canonical evidence that this is what the previous people who went into Area Zero, which is the end game area, saw. Now, what this led to was an insane spiral into a theory that sounded absolutely insane and ended up, well, us making this video.
And to be clear, there is so much that we have now dove into within the game in terms of the writing, like the magazines and books in the game, the classes in the game, the teachers in the game, and it combines all together to really paint a very intricate picture. No wonder the performance is where it's at. They spent countless hours devising just insanity here.
Yeah, and for anybody who has been playing the game, I'm sure that they're able to see that this game's lore is a lot deeper, a lot richer than a lot of Pokemon games that we've seen in the past. So let's just kind of dive right into what it is that we're discussing here, and that is apparently, thanks to user at Nuzumaki90 on Twitter, shout out to you for pointing all this stuff out, there's a huge chance that the Paradox Pokemon aren't actually Pokemon that time traveled, but rather, and this is in his words, dreamt up eldritch beings. Now, again, hearing that right out the gate, I know sounds absolutely crazy, and I know, Zach, you probably, when I brought this to you, did not see where I was going with this at all, because this is
dreamt up Pokemon, right? So the supposition here is that Area Zero was actually empty most times that people went down there, and that The book, and this is actually referenced in the game, the book was actually more regarded as fairy tales and less of scientific reporting.
Yeah. So essentially what ended up happening, and if you take the history class with the teacher, Miss Lyfort, in the actual game, you will have known this. There was an expedition originally that was done. There was a professor who wrote a book kind of documenting what he believed he saw. Now, in that book, he included sketches of these Pokemon, these very, very strong Pokemon that seem a little off from the ones in our time. Now, if we're going by the timeline of what Scarlet and Violet are setting up, when that book was published, it was a very, very popular book in Paldea, and Professor Sada or Professor Turo, depending on what game you get, when they were a child, had this book, and it became a huge obsession of, I want to go to the past, I want to go to the future. I want to see what these Pokemon are. And they dedicated their life's work to going down to this area that has, again, been confirmed there was nothing there. So essentially, the professors kind of built up this idea of what it was in their head, and their goal was to go down there, and as you guys know from the end game, create a time machine to get Pokemon from the past or future into our biome and kind of introduce this weird present that they were trying to do. I don't know what they were doing. They're not here anymore, so I don't think they do either. But what the theory kind of hints at is that what's actually happening here is the third legendary, which we know is actually very missing in this game compared to other Pokemon games, is supposedly the thing that is behind terastallization. And through books that you could read in the library, as well as little lore snippets that you can get, it becomes kind of clear that there's a huge chance that that Pokemon is able to bend reality. And actually, this is something that, like, I'm just realizing speaking about it, it fits in with the gimmick itself of gaining a type that you weren't previously.
Right.
The ability to terastallize is quite literally to morph reality, right? Like to give your Pokemon a type that never quite was there. So what this theory is kind of, I guess, bringing into question is, what if what ended up happening was the professors went down there, built this machine that they were so sure sent a Pokeball to the past, caught a Pokemon, or, future, caught a Pokemon, brought it back, and now it exists here? What if that wasn't exactly the case, and the thing that is causing terastallization, which has to be somewhere in the, center and deep crater of Area Zero, is actually creating these Pokemon to fit what the professors are imagining?
So basically what we're looking at here is the idea that somehow the terastallization crystals in combination with Area Zero were able to turn basically like dreams into reality or imagination into reality. And it seems like that third legendary is going to factor heavily into the explanation of this. Basically, we have all these little pieces of evidence through the classes, through the Pokedex entries, and through the descriptions of this book, the professor's work, that it all kind of comes from imagination. And I think a really other good point that I know you wanted to touch on was the Koraidon Miraidon being the legendaries, because Cyclizar is like the pride and joy of Paldea, and so no wonder Koraidon and Miraidon are like the most important Pokemon that occur from this, either fake or real time travel.
Exactly. I mean, it's so apparent. Like, I feel like people, and I know I thought this, is why is it that Cyclizar, a Gen 9 new Pokemon, that as cool as it is, normal dragon, sick design, love the idea of a motorcycle dragon, why is it that in the past and future, this Pokemon becomes legendary status? Well, again, going back to what Zat said, it makes sense. This is a Pokemon that they see all the time. Remember, when they were kids, this is when they were into the book. This is when they decided that they wanted to go to the past or future. It would make a lot of sense that they would see a Pokemon that they see all the time and imagine what it could possibly be like and hype it up to these insane kind of mythical, levels. And the biggest thing and the thing that I feel like nobody takes a second, or maybe they just think, hey, it's Pokemon, it has goofy writing. How is there a book that describes accurately these Pokemon, when it is confirmed that Sada and Turo are the ones that brought them there.
Right.
It makes no sense. There's no way that they saw these Pokemon because we already know the first two to come are the first two of your legendary, the first two Koraidon and the first two Miraidon. Those were the first successful time travels. How is it that years ago, when this book was written, it was documented that they saw these things? It could not have worked.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, I don't know if you mentioned this already, but even the naming convention for the Paradox Pokemon seems like childlike descriptors, not, scientific name. I mean, clearly, right? Not, everything isn't just iron,
Exactly.
iron. Like, it's just not what it is.
Yeah. Like, okay, for instance, with Wiglet compared to Diglett, those are two different Pokemon. Like, in every way, right? But they exist in the same timeline. Therefore, they deserve different names. However, when you're talking about a past version of Jigglypuff, yeah, it's changed to, how it is now, but why would you not refer to it as Jigglypuff still? And then to go a step further and refer to it as Screaming Tail because it does that and has a tail. Like, Game Freak, I think, really got us. I think it's a huge gotcha moment from them in where we did not question these things because we were just like, ooh, silly Pokemon, fun game. When you take a second to really dive into the world, it becomes so much more apparent that they're setting up something that's, I think, really going to rival what that endgame was. And I think that endgame was more of a taste of what's to come rather than the ending of something. It wasn't just like that's the big payoff. I do think there's a little more, even with the professor going to what the past or the future. Now that brings a whole other fold into this. Where did they actually go? And
is the original professor alive, dead? Did they terastalize themselves? What became of their demise or just at least their end game? Because it's very, very fascinating that we assume they were able to generate sort of all these Pokemon. And I wonder if there is any opportunity then for, say, someone else to generate a Pokemon. Because we're under the assumption, right, based on this theory, that Sada and Turo, depending on what game you played, are they the ones that gave the form to these Pokemon? Or do we think it's the collective sort of hive mind of Paldean explorers and children and whatever that defined these?
You see, that's interesting because now that brings into account, like, they do mention that the books themselves were wildly passed around, wildly discussed, whether it be as a fairy tale or some people taking it as real, like the professors. So you're absolutely right, Zach. It could kind of be this big communal, hive mind situation that they have dreamt up this situation. And maybe the professors were the vessel in which they created a machine to bring those thoughts to fruition. That's
existence.
That's kind of the theory I have. It is apparent that the professor is definitely the catalyst to whatever happens, because again, those creatures weren't real until they went down there. And if I remember correctly, I did pass the final in Paldea, so I should remember correctly, but that was only about 20 years ago. So terastalization is fairly new in terms of like being able to control it. And it was Turo who went down there to be able to create the Terra Balls and allow this to be a phenomenon that it is.
And the book thing just becomes incredibly strange. How was there this book before that machine? And the only counterpoint I'll give, just to throw it out there, small chance that it's correct, is if they do some strange time loop thing where, because at the end of the game the professor goes back in time, or whatever, they somehow they created this book and then it fed it. Do you know what I mean? Like one of those things where like, oh, they were always in the past.
It was the book that the professor went back with, and then it was published. And yeah, I do agree they can absolutely do something like that, and it will still carry the weight. It just is interesting to think that the game that was built around time from the start of its first announcement, literally, to now, we have looked at this game under the lens of time travel, time gimmicky, stuff. But in reality, it could be that there is a third legendary with the ability to manifest creations based on a trainer's wants and dreams. And that, I feel, sets up for a very, very dangerous antagonist for the DLC.
Yeah. Or this beautiful, perfect TPC ending where you and Nimona and Arvin have to dream up this, Paradox Suicune to defeat whatever Paradox evil they come up with. I mean, how perfect is that? I mean, you got, Spirit Bomb over in Dragon Ball Z, and now you have communal dreaming of the coolest Pokemon ever. I mean, honestly, no joke, that's very corny, but that would be, to me, a satisfying ending to this saga.
Absolutely.
Is like, Pokemon has always been about us as players, gamers, real people, dreaming about what this could be like, and if this was real, and if we were in there. So knowing that the in-game characters can dream about Pokemon as well, and generate something exciting for themselves, like, I don't know, that's sort of, it's insanely corny, but it's like really sweet.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think that's like what this whole game has been about so far, is having the idea of what you want, going and setting out and getting it, and making your dream a reality. That's quite literally what the game is based upon. They use the treasure analogy the whole time, but even at the end, when the professor decides to leave this world and go to the time that they want, they say that that's their treasure. They're achieving the goal that they have in their mind. And so to have a Pokemon really capend that with the ability to quite literally make your goals real, make your ideas real, it can lead us to an ending that's more fulfilling, because while the ending of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet was absolutely phenomenal, it had this dark heaviness to it that I think is very, very off-putting and different for Pokemon. And I welcome it, don't get it twisted. But I do think we can have a nice, big resolution with, like you said, having the main gang have to work together to create a Paradox Pokemon, a legendary, and from the leaks we do know that Virizion and Suicune are going to be DLC Paradox Mons. It would be very cool if, like you said, they have to come up with the strongest Paradox legendary they can think of to fight off whatever this thing is. And yeah, that would be so sick. I'm so with that.
And then the dangerous entire franchise implications where we find out that Pokemon were just dreamed up by
they were never real
people, and they were never real. All right, we'll let you simmer and bake all of that in your brains. Let us know what you think. How about this theory, man? How about this changing the entire implications of Scarlet and Violet, the entire, honestly, goals and plans and purpose of the professors, and what it means for the series going forward? Give us your take in the comments down below. Shout out to Joseph for dissecting this all, and shout out to Nuzumaki90 for sort of giving context to some of the things, but also shout out to the game, because these games do emphasize lore in a way with the school and the classes and the books that I think many other Pokemon games maybe have wanted to do and haven't come anywhere close to accomplishing. So shout out to that. Shout out to you, Joseph, and everybody stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, stay positive out there. Until next time, this is a wild world of Pokemon, and I can't believe we just made a 20-minute video talking about the potential Dream Eldritch Mons from Scarlet and Violet. That shows what level of impact, performance or not, these games have. So if you don't think they're a 9 out of 10, then clearly you're wrong. All right, until next time, thanks again, everybody. Stay safe out there. SwitchForce out.